Hi, I'm Nick Thomas, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes big betrayals can lead to even bigger wins. In both business and family, the person you trust the most can be the one working against you. But they often don't realize what's beneath their feet before they try to push you off the edge. Let me take you back to where it all started. Thomas Technologies wasn't always the $200 million company it is today. 7 years ago, it was a struggling IT consulting firm my dad had built from scratch. My dad was a genius with technology, but not great at running a business. By 2013, we were 4 months away from going bankrupt, and the stress was taking a toll on his health. I was 27 and fresh out of business school. My older brother, Tony, was 31 and well-known in the local nightlife scene. Dad had always preferred Tony, the charming firstborn who could talk his way out of anything. But charm doesn't pay the bills, and Tony's partying had already cost the company several big clients. I'll never forget the rainy Thursday when I found Dad slumped over his desk, tears in his eyes as he looked at our latest financial reports. "It's over, Nick," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Everything I built. I'm going to lose it all." Something clicked in me that day. I couldn't just stand by and watch my father's dream fall apart, even if he'd always treated me like I was second best. While Tony was out blowing company money at fancy clubs, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I started working 20-hour days, learning every part of the business, meeting every client, and reviewing every contract. Mom was worried. "Nick, you need to rest," she'd say, bringing me dinner at midnight. "You can't save the company all by yourself." But that's exactly what I did. The first year was grueling. I worked hard to fix our debt, cut unnecessary costs including Tony's party budget, and personally visited every big client we had lost. Many slammed the door in my face, but I kept going back. Persistence pays off. By the end of that year, we were finally breaking even. Tony found it funny. "Look at little Mikey playing businessman," he'd joke whenever he showed up at the office. "Dad's still going to put me in charge, you know. I'm the oldest." I ignored him and stayed focused. Over the next 6 years, I turned Thomas Technologies from a small IT consulting firm into a full-service digital transformation company. We created our own software, expanded into cloud services, and built a strong reputation in the industry. The company grew fast. Our revenue went from $3 million to $20 million, then to $100 million, and finally past $200 million. Our team grew from 80 people to over 700, and we opened offices in 4 countries. As the company thrived, Dad's health got better, but his favoritism didn't change. Every win was somehow credited to Tony, even though he spent most of his time planning vacations. At family dinners, Dad would praise Tony's business skills, while I quietly reviewed quarterly reports on my phone. I didn't care about getting credit. What mattered to me was the company, our employees, and the legacy we were building. Besides, I had my own plans. What no one knew, not even Dad, was that I had been keeping detailed records over the years. I documented everything, every bad decision Tony made, every client he lost, and every dollar he wasted. More importantly, I built strong relationships with our key clients, making sure they relied on me personally. I had another secret too, one that would prove crucial during tough times. When the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, I had used my own savings and taken out personal loans to keep us afloat. In return, I was given shares, lots of shares. The paperwork was buried in the company's files, but legally, I owned 55% of Thomas Technologies. I thought that would be enough to protect me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Last month, everything changed. Dad announced he was retiring, and everyone thought he would name me as his successor. After all, I had been running the company for years. Even Tony had started showing up to work more often, probably sensing a change was coming. The shareholders meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. All the key people were there, board members, investors, and major stakeholders. I had prepared a detailed presentation about the company's growth plan for the next 6 years. When Dad stood up to speak, I noticed Tony smirking, but I didn't think much of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad began, "as you know, I'm retiring as CEO of Thomas Technologies. This company has been my life's work, and choosing my successor was not an easy decision." He paused, looking around the room. But there's only one person who truly has the leadership qualities to take Thomas Technologies to the next level. Someone who understands our family values and has the vision to lead us into the future. I sat up straighter in my chair, ready to accept the responsibility I had worked so hard for. My son, Tony Thomas, will take over as CEO, effective immediately. The room fell silent. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. But Dad wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, Tony has brought some concerning issues to my attention. It seems certain individuals have been making unauthorized decisions that could harm the company's integrity. Tony stood up, holding a folder. I'm afraid my brother Nick has been acting outside his authority, making promises to clients we can't deliver on, and possibly engaging in unethical practices. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every accusation was a twisted version of the truth. The very decisions that had saved the company were being painted as reckless and wrong. As my final act as CEO, Dad said, I'm terminating Nick's employment with Thomas Technologies, effective immediately. Security guards started walking toward me. Tony looked at me with fake sympathy. I'm sorry it had to end this way, little brother, he said, smirking. But hey, maybe now you'll finally have a life outside the office. The room erupted in whispers. I felt numb. Everything I had worked for was being taken away in an instant, and the person I trusted the most was the one behind it all. I was escorted out of the building that day, my key card deactivated, and all my access revoked. Some people looked at me with pity, others with smug satisfaction, but none of them knew what was coming. While Tony was busy scheming against me, he had overlooked four critical things. First, those unauthorized decisions he accused me of were all properly documented and approved. Second, my 55% ownership stake wasn't as hidden as they assumed. It was rock solid. And third, when you spend a decade building a company's technology infrastructure, you know every single system inside and out, including all the secrets they think are safely buried. As I walked to my car that evening, I felt the first pang of betrayal, but it quickly gave way to determination. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to an old friend at the SEC. We need to talk. Then I went home to wait. Saturday morning was going to be unforgettable. Saturday arrived with a thunderstorm, fitting for what was about to unfold. I sat in my home office, coffee in hand, watching the clock as it ticked toward 8:30 a.m., the time Tony would stride into his new CEO office for the first time. Over the weekend, the fallout had been interesting. My mom had called 18 times, leaving tearful voicemails about keeping the family together. Dad didn't call at all. Tony, meanwhile, had been busy partying at his favorite clubs. Social media was plastered with photos of him celebrating his victory, some showing company credit cards clearly on the table. He had no idea the storm that was brewing. Tony always thought technology was beneath him. That's geek stuff, he used to say, refusing to learn even basic cybersecurity. That arrogance was about to cost him dearly. At exactly 8:50 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rosalie, my loyal executive assistant. Tony hadn't bothered to fire her, probably assuming she was just a secretary who brought coffee. Her message read, "It's starting." I smiled and opened my laptop. Even though my official access had been revoked, I still had backdoor entry to the company's systems. When you build the infrastructure from scratch, you leave yourself away in, just in case. I connected to the internal security feed and pulled up the live camera in the CEO's office. The camera showed Tony walking into the office with a smug grin and a cup of coffee. He dropped into the leather chair, my chair, and pressed the power button on the computer. He looked ready to rule. But instead of the usual Windows login screen, a video started playing. Tony froze as he watched the footage. It was security camera video from 4 years ago. The screen showed Tony sitting in that very office, shaking hands with an executive from our biggest competitor. The audio was crystal clear as Tony detailed the deal. He was selling them confidential client data for a hefty payout. Tony's smug expression quickly turned into panic as the room fell silent. Then, the video cut to more recent footage. Tony using the company credit card for personal expenses, partying at exclusive clubs, and signing off on shady invoices. Meanwhile, in my home office, I calmly sipped my coffee as the chaos unfolded. Tony tried to turn off the computer, But the video kept playing on every screen in the building: laptops, conference room monitors, even the TVs in the cafeteria. Employees stopped what they were doing to watch. Within minutes, my phone buzzed again. It was Rosalie. Security just walked into the CEO's office. I leaned back in my chair and waited for the next part to play out. I had already sent the footage and evidence to the board and key investors over the weekend. My friend at the SEC was also looking into it, and they weren't happy with what they found. By noon, Tony was escorted out of the building, just like I had been, but with a much bigger audience. The difference was I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. Tony's voice echoed through the office, panicked and desperate. "I can get you their information. My idiot brother does all the work anyway. Just make sure the payment goes to my Cayman account." He frantically tried to shut off the monitor, pressing buttons and pulling cables, but it was useless. The incriminating video kept playing on every screen in his office. That was just the start of his nightmare. Tony's phone buzzed. The SEC had received an anonymous tip about insider trading, complete with evidence documenting years of his illegal activities. At the same time, his private email account exploded with notifications. Somehow, all his confidential communications had been leaked straight to the board members. Down in the lobby, federal agents walked through the front door. I watched it all unfold from the security feed, a front row seat to the downfall of someone who thought he was untouchable. Tony's expression shifted from confusion to full-blown panic. He tried calling Dad, but Dad's line was busy. Likely because he was learning about his beloved firstborn's shady dealings in real time. The meeting that changed everything. At 9:15 a.m., Rosalie, my loyal assistant, stepped into Tony's office. She remained calm, as if this were just another Saturday morning. "Mr. Thomas," she said politely, "the board is requesting an emergency meeting. Also, federal agents are here to speak with you." Tony, already sweating, snapped, "Tell them I'm busy. Cancel everything and get IT up here to fix these damn computers." Rosalie gave him a small, polite smile. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, sir." Tony froze. "What do you mean?" "The entire IT department has resigned," Rosalie replied, setting a folder on his desk. "They sent a company-wide email explaining their decision. Something about loyalty to the person who actually built this company." "They can't do that," Tony shouted, his voice cracking. "We have contracts." Rosalie gestured to the folder. "Actually, their contracts were with a subsidiary company that holds all of our intellectual property rights, a company that, as of this morning, is no longer affiliated with Thomas Technologies." Tony's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside was a simple document outlining the ownership structure of Thomas Innovation Labs, a subsidiary I had quietly created years ago. It was the company that owned all the patents, software, and client contracts that made Thomas Technologies valuable. I don't understand," Tony stammered. "I own Thomas Innovation Labs," Rosalie explained. 100% of it. But the clients, Tony's voice trailed off, barely above a whisper. "They've already been informed of the change," Rosalie said smoothly. "Most of them have signed new contracts directly with Thomas Innovation Labs. It seems they prefer working with the person who's actually handled their accounts all these years." Tony's face turned pale as realization dawned. Everything that mattered, the technology, the clients, the employees, was loyal to me. What he had stolen was nothing more than an empty shell. The office door swung open again, and 3 FBI agents walked in, followed closely by Mr. Mark, the company's chief legal counsel. "Tony Thomas," one of the agents said, holding up a badge. "We need to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions." Tony shot up from his chair, wild-eyed. "You can't do this. I'm the CEO." "Not anymore," Rosalie said calmly. "The board has already voted to remove you, effective immediately." Tony turned to me on the security feed, realizing I was watching. "This isn't over," he shouted, but his voice cracked with fear. The agents cuffed him and began reading his rights. As they escorted him out of the office, I leaned back in my chair, watching it all unfold with a sense of closure. Tony's reign was over, and so was the chaos he had brought to the company. Thomas Technologies, stripped of its true value, was no longer my problem. Thomas Innovation Labs, the heart and soul of what I had built, was ready to thrive under my full control. Sometimes, the best way to win is to let the other side think they've won, until they realize you've already taken everything that matters. "I'm in charge here," Tony shouted, desperation thick in his voice. Mr. Mark, the company's chief legal counsel, cleared his throat. Actually, about that, he pulled out a document and handed it to Tony. The board just concluded an emergency meeting. Given the circumstances, they've voted to remove you as CEO, effective immediately. Tony's face twisted in anger. "They can't do that. I own this company." Mr. Mark adjusted his glasses and replied calmly, "You own shares in Thomas Technologies." However, as of 9:30 this morning, Thomas Technologies has no intellectual property, no major clients, and no core development team. I believe the stock price reflects that reality. Panicking, Tony lunged for his computer, probably to check the stock ticker. But the screen still displayed the loop of videos exposing his illegal activities over the years. His shoulders sagged as the weight of the situation hit him. Moments later, federal agents escorted him out of the building. His designer suit was wrinkled, and his face was pale as whispers and stares followed him out. Watching the live feed from my home office, I drafted one final email to the remaining employees of Thomas Technologies. Subject: A new beginning. To all employees, you have a choice. Stay with a sinking ship or join us at Thomas Innovation Labs, where innovation and integrity truly mean something. Your jobs are secure, your benefits will be better, and most importantly, your hard work will be valued and respected. We look forward to welcoming you to a company that puts its people and principles first. Within an hour, 95% of the staff had accepted the offer. The heart of the company had officially moved on, leaving Thomas Technologies an empty husk. The fallout was swift and brutal. By the next morning, Thomas Technologies stock had plummeted by 80%. Headlines splashed across every major business publication. Tech CEO arrested on fraud charges. Thomas Technologies in freefall as scandal erupts. But I wasn't done yet. 4 days after Tony's arrest, I sat in my sleek new office at Thomas Innovation Labs, a state-of-the-art building I had quietly purchased 7 months earlier. Rosalie walked in with a visitor, Mr. Guillaume, my father's financial advisor. His expression was grave. "He's been calling non-stop," Mr. Guillaume began, looking uncomfortable. "Ever since your father realized his retirement fund is gone. Because he invested everything in Thomas Technology stock, I finished for him." My father had always bragged about having skin in the game, pouring his entire retirement portfolio into company shares. I had warned him countless times about diversifying, but he never listened. Now, those shares were worth pennies on the dollar. "Your father is desperate," Mr. Guillaume continued. "Your mother is worried they could lose the house." I leaned back in my chair, the memories flooding in. Every time Dad dismissed my concerns about Tony's behavior, every time he called my hard work luck, and every lecture about how Tony was the leader I could never be. "Set up a meeting," I said after a long pause. "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Here." The next morning, my parents arrived at Thomas Innovation Labs. My mother looked like she had been crying, her eyes red and swollen. My father, once proud and confident, looked like he had aged a decade in a week. They sat across from me in the visitor chairs, the same model Dad used to make me sit in during his lectures about leadership. "Son," Dad began, his voice shaking, "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes," I repeated, my tone measured but firm. "Let's talk about those mistakes." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "You trusted Tony blindly. You ignored every warning I gave you. You dismissed my work, my sacrifices, as luck. And now, you want me to fix the mess you let happen?" Dad looked down, ashamed. Mom reached across the table, her voice trembling. "Nick, please. We don't know what to do." I let the silence hang in the room for a moment, then sighed. "I'll help you," I said, finally. "But on my terms." They both looked up, a mix of relief and guilt in their eyes. By the end of the meeting, I had worked out a deal. I'd secure their finances, ensuring they wouldn't lose the house. But there was a catch. Dad had to step back completely. No interference, no lectures, No input on how I ran things. As they left the office, I sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. For the first time, I felt like I was no longer living in someone else's shadow. Thomas Innovation Labs was mine, a fresh start, built on hard work, integrity, and a vision for the future. And for Tony, he was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it comes, it's worth every second. I spoke calmly but firmly, cutting through the tension in the room. You let Tony destroy evidence of his crimes. You helped him steal company money. You were part of the fraud that hurt our employees, our clients, and our shareholders. I didn't know, Dad tried to protest. You knew, I interrupted. You just didn't care because Tony was your golden boy, and I was just the backup plan. Mom started crying softly. I handed her a tissue and continued, but that's not why you're here. You're here because you're broke. The company's shares you were counting on for retirement are worthless. Dad slumped in his chair. Nick, please. We're family. Family? I replied with a humorless smile. Was I family when you let Tony take credit for my work? Was I family when you fired me in front of the entire companies? I reached into my desk and pulled out a folder. Here's what's going to happen, I said, sliding it across the table. Thomas Innovation Labs will buy back your shares in Thomas Technologies at the original price you paid. Their eyes lit up with hope, but I wasn't finished. There are conditions. First, you both sign a non-disclosure agreement about Tony's activities. Second, you retire quietly to that house in New York you've always talked about. And third, you stay out of my business entirely. Mom whispered. You do that for us? Not for you, I said, my voice soft but firm. For the scared 13-year-old boy who used to believe his father hung the moon. He deserved better than what you gave him. Dad opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. One more thing. The money comes with strings attached, a trustee to oversee it. There'll be a monthly allowance, investment restrictions, and safeguards to make sure you don't gamble it away on another one of Tony's schemes. You don't trust us? Dad asked, his voice heavy with shame. You taught me that lesson well, I said simply. They signed the papers in silence. As security escorted them out of the building, Dad turned back one last time. I was wrong about you, son, he said. You're a better businessman than I ever was. No, Dad, I replied. I'm just better at knowing who my real enemies are. 6 years later. It's been 6 years since that day. Thomas Innovation Labs has grown into a billion-dollar company, known for cutting-edge technology and ethical business practices. Tony served 3 years in prison and now works as a bartender in Jackson, a far cry from the life he once had. Mom and Dad live quietly in New York. Occasionally, they send me postcards, usually with short, polite messages. I keep them in a drawer unread. The scars of the past haven't disappeared, but they've taught me the most important lesson of all. Loyalty and respect must be earned, even from family. I never respond to their postcards. Last week, I got an invitation to speak at my old business school. The topic? The importance of integrity in family business. I couldn't help but smile as I accepted. After all, I have quite a story to share. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about tearing your enemies down. It's about building something so successful that they're forced to live with the regret of betting on the wrong person. And for those who wonder how the quiet one, the backup plan, managed to win it all, well, let me put it this way. While the flashy peacocks are busy showing off their feathers, the eagles are quietly observing, waiting, and planning their next move. Because in business, just like in life, it's not about who starts at the top. It's about who's still standing when the dust settles.